22nd here in Korea, and these are what's making headlines at this hour. President Moon Jae-in calls for an expansionary budget spending to revamp the nation's economy. During his budget speech, he also addresses ways to create a fair society. Prime Minister Lee attends Japanese Emperor Naruhito's enthronement ceremony. He's due to meet with Japanese leader Shinzo Abe on Thursday, where he will deliver a letter from President Moon. 6 Russian military aircraft intrude into South Korea's air defense zone, prompting Seoul to dispatch fighter jets. This is the 20th intrusion by Russian planes into South Korea's airspace this year alone. Breaking the silence since this month's no-deal North Korea-U.S. nuclear talks, President Trump says there is some very interesting information on North Korea. NEWSCENTER begins now. Good evening to our viewers in Asia and hello to others watching from around the world. Welcome to Arirang News Center. I'm Han-daeun in Seoul. We begin with President Moon's budget speech. Addressing the parliament, the president called for a fiscal expansion to help the South Korean economy overcome challenges amid trade conflicts. He also called on the U.S. and North Korea to resume dialogue to surmount the last hurdle Korea faces on the road to denuclearization. Our Shin Se-min starts us off.
President Moon Jae-in called on all sides of the political aisle to work on passing the government's $440 billion budget for next year, a 9.3% increase on year. Addressing the parliament, the president said his nation's trade-dependent economy is facing a critical moment amid expanding trade protectionism.
우리가 지금 제대로 대응하지 않으면 머지않은 미래에 더 큰 비용을 치르게 될 것입니다. 내년도 확장 예산이 선택이 아닌 필수인 이유입니다. 재정이 적극적인 역할을 하여 대외 충격의 파고를 막는 방파제 역할을 해야 합니다.
As for the backdrop of that active fiscal policy, the president touted the nation's sound fiscal management. Urging the parliament to unite its energy, the president said his administration will use the remainder of its term to create an innovative, embracing, and fair nation where all people can prosper. South Korea will also increase defense spending by $58 billion, or 7% next year, with the president stressing that a strong defense is crucial in self-determination. The president, who has long championed relations with North Korea, kept his hope for a breakthrough in the nuclear talks. Referring to what many consider a deadlock in the denuclearization process, with both the North and the U.S. not making any visible actions for weeks now, the president said the relevant parties are facing the last critical hurdle.
한반도는 지금 항구적 평화로 가기 위한 마지막 고비를 마주하고 있습니다. 우리가 함께 넘어야 할 비핵화의 벽입니다. 대화만이 그 벽을 무너뜨릴 수 있습니다.
He added that South Korea and the relevant parties of the nuclear talks must do all they can for peace through dialogue, perhaps sending a message to leaders Kim and Trump to resume the nuclear talks. Calling on North Korea to respond, the president said a bright future for the regime is only possible on the basis of a peace economy that's driven by inter-Korean economic projects. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Also in his budget speech, President Moon reaffirmed his determination to establish a fair society. That requires major changes in the prosecution's investigative practices, as well as the education system. Our Park Hee-jun has more on that.
Fairness, the most frequently spoken word in President Moon Jae-in's budget speech Tuesday at the National Assembly.
국민의 다양한 목소리를 엄중한 마음으로 들었습니다. 공정과 개혁에 대한 국민의 열망을 다시 한번 절감했습니다.
President Moon said the people are demanding the eradication of unfairness and unjust privileges in all corners of society. That begins, he said, with reform of the prosecution. He promised to enact a reform plan that better respects human rights by the end of the month. But Parliament must also do its part by passing related bills, one regarding the establishment of a special unit that investigates corruption among high-ranking officials. But according to President Moon, fairness needs to be established in other areas as well, especially education.
경제뿐 아니라 사회, 교육, 문화 전반에서 공정이 새롭게 구축되어야 합니다. 국민들께서 가장 가슴 아파하는 것이 교육에서의 불공정입니다.
In his first public address on the subject, President Moon promised to expand the proportion of regular admissions for college entrants to create a more impartial education system. Regular admissions focus more on academic grades rather than extracurricular activities, thereby reducing the influence of powerful parents. He was likely taking into account the controversy that surfaced when former Justice Minister Gov's daughter was found to have received preferential treatment getting into college. This principle will also be applied to the employment sector. Public organizations will be strictly inspected and blind hiring actively used to prevent discrimination among applicants. President Moon says employment procedures will be continuously reformed until no room is left for corruption. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
South Korea's rival political parties have responded to President Moon's speech. Divided as usual, it's going to be a tough month as they start deliberations on the budget. Our National Assembly correspondent Kim Min-ji has the details.
The ruling Democratic Party welcomed the president's budget speech, saying the 2020 spending plan will breathe life into the economy and improve people's livelihoods. It said the budget has been allocated appropriately to address security, welfare, and innovation. The party also vowed legislative efforts in order to maximize the impact of the budget.
Data shows that the job market is improving, and the tasks that lie ahead include maintaining and strengthening growth and creating better jobs. This is something rival parties need to work together on.
The main opposition Liberty Korea party criticized the speech, saying it was full of self-praise and claimed it only proves the administration is blind to the dire economic and security situation facing the nation. It said the expansionary budget is only a short-term remedy and that the government needs to overhaul its policies if it wants to revive the economy. On reforming the prosecution, the party said the president should leave it to the rival parties to reach a deal and refrain from pressuring the assembly.
It was a speech that reaffirmed the stubbornness of the administration and was probably full of despair for the people. The government says the budget is for innovation, inclusive growth, and peace, but it's just full of unfairness and old orders.
Rival parties will start deliberations over the budget plan and have until December 2nd to approve it. The ruling party is expected to put in full efforts to secure the budget as it is to support President Moon through his third year in office. But the main opposition has vowed to closely scrutinize the bill to make sure taxpayers' money is not wasted, especially in the portions allocated for job creation and inter-Korean projects, claiming that the government is trying to win over voters ahead of next year's general elections.
Eyes will be on whether the bill is passed by the December deadline, but what's for sure is that a fierce tug-of-war will soon be underway, with rival parties already at odds over a set of reform bills. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon attended the Japanese Emperor Naruhito's enthronement ceremony today. Prior to his departure, he expressed hope that his visit could help ease the tensions between Seoul and Tokyo. Lee Kyung-eun reports.
Before he left for Japan Tuesday morning, South Korean Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon said in a Facebook post that he will celebrate the start of a new era under Emperor Naruhito and send condolences to the people affected by the latest typhoon. The ceremony at the Imperial Palace in Tokyo was attended by Lee and South Korean ambassador to Japan, Nam Kwan-pyo, and heads of state and royals from more than 180 countries, including Britain's Prince Charles. South Korean President Moon Jae-in did not attend himself, but the Prime Minister's office in Seoul has confirmed that he has sent a letter to the emperor as well as one for Abe. The content of the letter has not been revealed, but experts say that it is likely to emphasize the importance of dialogue and improving bilateral ties. It will be delivered to the palace through the foreign ministries of the two countries. Earlier in the day, the South Korean Prime Minister expressed hope that his visit will contribute to achieving an amicable and mature relationship between Seoul and Tokyo. He also said he has a special connection to the centuries-old enthronement ceremony. Back in 1990, he was a foreign correspondent in Tokyo for the Korean newspaper Donghwailbo, and he reported on the enthronement of the current emperor's father, Akihito. After the ceremony, Lee paid tribute at a monument honoring a Korean hero, Yeosu, who died in 2001 while rescuing a Japanese man who had fallen onto the subway tracks. After that, he is due to attend a banquet dinner at around 7 p.m. In the remaining days, he is set to meet with young Japanese people, politicians, and business leaders, but there is a particular focus on Thursday when he will sit down with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Reports in South Korea say the meeting will last around 10 minutes. 이경은, Arirang News.
Emperor Naruhito formally proclaimed enthronement today as dignitaries from across the globe closely watched. And in his speech, he promised to fulfill his role according to Japan's constitution. But the constitution is something his Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has long sought to change. Our Ji-young has more.
Before some 2,000 foreign dignitaries around the world, including the UK's Prince Charles and Japanese officials, the 59-year-old emperor's ascension was formalized at the Imperial Palace, where he was accompanied by Empress Masako. Dressed in a dark orange robe, worn only by emperors on special occasions, he took his seat on the so-called chrysanthemum throne to cheers from his courtiers and guests.
I will always wish for the welfare of this country and for world peace. I will approach the people while acting according to Japan's constitution and will fulfill my duties as the symbol of the country.
The emperor's remarks could be contrasted with those of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who is pushing to amend Japan's constitution, which was drafted by the U.S. after World War II. He has long said the constitution should state clearly the role of the self-defense forces, which are a de facto military, despite the constitution's ban on Japan having such a force. At the ceremony, Abe delivered a congratulatory speech on behalf of the nation and then shouted Banzai, which in Japanese means "Long live the emperor." Ji-young, Arirang News.
The South Korean military scrambled fighter jets earlier today after a total of 6 Russian military aircraft entered the Korean Air Defense Identification Zone. Our Kim Ji-yeon at the Defense Ministry for us tonight.
South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said a Russian A-50 early warning aircraft, 3 Suoi-27 fighter jets, and 2 Tu-95 bombers entered the Korean Air Defense Identification Zone Tuesday between 9:23 a.m. and 3:13 p.m. Korea time. What stood out during the intrusion was that the Tu-95 bomber stayed inside KADIZ for about 2 hours, flying in a U-shaped trajectory near Korea's western port city of Pohang, the southernmost island of Jeju, and then towards the northwesterly direction towards the West Sea. The Joint Chiefs said the intrusion prompted the South Korean military to scramble some 10 fighter jets and take measures to prevent the Russian aircraft from advancing closer to Korean airspace. Including Tuesday's 4 entries, Russian planes have entered KADIZ 20 times so far this year. In July, Seoul's Foreign and Defense Ministries summoned officials from the Russian embassy to lodge strong protests for entering KADIZ and Korean airspace. The intent of the recent intrusions by the Russians are unspecified, but Seoul's defense ministry said the two countries will be holding a joint defense committee meeting for 2 days in Seoul starting Wednesday. They're slated to discuss the signing of a memorandum of understanding to establish a military hotline between their air forces to prevent further accidental entries into each other's air defense identification zones. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Breaking the silence since this month's no-deal North Korea-U.S. nuclear talks, President Trump says there is something very interesting information on North Korea. The comment seems to suggest there might be progress happening with North Korea behind the scenes on denuclearization. Our Hong Yoo has this report.
U.S. President Donald Trump says there is some very interesting information on North Korea and speculated there could be a major rebuild at a certain point. These were Trump's first comments on North Korea since the breakdown of the working-level talks with the North in Stockholm. During a cabinet meeting on Monday local time, President Trump said that something is going to be happening with North Korea. Washington and Pyongyang had seemingly been deadlocked in their denuclearization negotiations. His working-level talks did not resume in the 2 weeks anticipated by the U.S. after their breakdown earlier this month. Even though Trump did not elaborate on what is going on, what kind of information he has, and what the major rebuild means, it seems that there is communication between Washington and Pyongyang behind the scenes. At the meeting, President Trump put forward his policy towards North Korea as his achievement. He said that if it wasn't for him, the U.S. could have been in a big war with North Korea, adding that former President Barack Obama had told him his biggest problem was not knowing how to solve the North Korea problem. According to Trump, Obama had tried to call Kim 11 times during his presidency, but those calls were all rejected, while Trump's calls were answered. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
South Korea has been the biggest donor of humanitarian aid to North Korea so far this year. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, South Korea has contributed more than $9 million in aid to the North through international organizations. That's about 30% of the total international aid provided to the North so far this year. About half of South Korea's aid was in the form of nutritional aid to the North through the World Food Program. Switzerland, Sweden, and Russia were the next largest donors of aid to North Korea. Fine dust has once again covered South Korea. Meanwhile, there are some movements this week in Seoul promoting green transitions. Our Choi Jung-yoon visited one of them, the Global Green Growth Week Summit, and reports on what South Korea can do to tackle climate change and air pollution.
South Korea has the second highest levels of fine dust out of 36 OECD countries. And out of the 100 cities in the OECD with the worst dust levels, 44 are located in Korea. Amid growing concerns over air pollution, the National Council on Climate and Air Quality has called for the strongest measures yet to reduce fine dust emissions by 20% from last year's levels. Those measures including stricter bans on all diesel cars and reducing the operation of coal power plants. Seoul has recently taken action such as an alternate no driving day system for public workers as well. Experts say, however, that while cracking down on activities that create emissions, the government also needs to find approaches for green transitions by using taxation as a policy instrument.
We have to look at different economic incentives, such as those set by governments through taxes or subsidies that sends price signals to all the actors in the economy, from companies to private citizens, about production and consumption decisions.
Expanding measures to promote renewable energy and green growth, Korea will hold a second P4G, partnering for green growth and the Global Goals 2030 Summit in Seoul next June. This comes after President Moon Jae-in proposed Seoul's vision for green growth at the P4G Summit's first edition in Denmark last year.
The key part of having a country like the Republic of Korea, is it itself has grown very quickly. It provides an example of how to grow in the future as it goes through its own transition, but also how other developing countries can make that accelerated transition.
The vision states that economic growth and environmental issues are not trade-offs but mutually reinforce each other. A global initiative hosted by 12 countries and 6 international organizations, the P4G looks for new business and financial models that can drive green developments.
The key agenda of 2020 Seoul Summit will be partnerships between the public and private sectors in order to bring sustainable inclusive growth and action on climate change. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
And at a cabinet meeting this morning, government ministries have announced plans to reduce Korea's greenhouse gas emissions by almost a third. They plan to accomplish that through the use of an emissions trading scheme, electric and hydrogen cars, and more. Our Kim Ha-sung with the details.
South Korea has unveiled its 2030 target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 32% from business-as-usual levels in 2017. The Ministry of Environment said the goal is to cut emissions to 536 million tons by 2030. It also outlined a series of measures to address climate change and comply with the Paris Agreement, which aims to limit the global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrialized levels by the end of the century. That includes a transition to a low-carbon society by reducing greenhouse gas emissions used in building facilities and transportation. It'll also use a carbon emissions trading system to strengthen corporate responsibility in cutting greenhouse gases and come up with an evaluation system to monitor progress. South Korea's Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy also said it'll expand the use of electric cars and hydrogen-powered cars to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions in transportation. The government will install 310 hydrogen car fueling stations by 2022 and increase that to 1,200 by 2040. It set a goal of providing 850,000 hydrogen-powered cars by 2030. By that date, drivers will be able to reach charging stations within 30 minutes, which will be shortened to 15 minutes by 2040. 김혜성, Arirang News.
A convention opened today in the southeastern city of Yeosu, bringing together Korean business leaders from more than 60 countries. The organizers are expecting attendance of around 4,000, including business leaders based locally. Held every October, it's one of the biggest annual events for Koreans doing business at home and abroad. Participants will have a chance to build their global networks and attend seminars to expand their businesses. South Korea plans to support more active cultural exchanges with Southeast Asia. Seoul's Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism met with ASEAN reporters ahead of his special meeting with ASEAN culture ministers. While highlighting the significance of the economic ties between the two, the minister also pointed out the importance of expanding their cultural partnership.
We continue to witness the growth and active development of the ASEAN region and growing interest and support for Korean culture as well. It is my belief that culture is one of the most critical sources to drive our futures. I plan to support more active cultural exchanges that will lead us to greater peace and common prosperity. The creation of the ASEAN-Korea Traditional Orchestra is a prime example of the harmonious spirit and exchanges we have been engaged in.
Culture ministers from South Korea and 10 ASEAN nations will hold a two-day special meeting from Wednesday in the southwestern city of Gwangju to discuss ways to boost culture and arts exchanges, such as joint creative projects and the preservation and utilization of cultural heritage. That meeting comes ahead of the Korea-ASEAN Special Summit in Busan next month. Nearly 5 years into the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, UN experts say the world hasn't seen enough progress and we need more innovative solutions. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
The power of science and innovation could put the world back on track to a better, more sustainable future. A report by the United Nations Office of Sustainable Development was launched in Korea's western city of Songdo, highlighting the lack of global progress on achieving the world's sustainable development goals by 2030.
Unfortunately, a fair number of goals we're moving backwards on, and we can probably think in terms of inequality, biological diversity, climate and waste. And what's happening there is we're seeing in many countries growing levels of inequality. So in some countries we see that their GDP or their gross domestic product is growing, but that doesn't mean that everybody is getting better off.
A key source of transformative change is needed, and that's science and technology.
We could think of a systematic way of approaching how the science could influence the policy making, for example. Not only guessing, but I think we need to have evidence-based policies and then really make a big shift for transformation for the sustainable development.
Experts gathered to discuss how such potential can be captured through 6 entry points to put the world back on track on the path of sustainable development, including eradicating poverty and achieving good health, education, clean energy and equality. Experts say science-based approaches can better address the developmental needs of each social context.
We also call for action for labor unions, governments, CSOs, universities, schools, everybody to work together to build community-based social networks so they can then become the agents of change for reducing inequality and removing inequalities of all forms. So it's really critical that countries like South Korea, which has done a lot in terms of IT, internet, and so on, be at the forefront in moving forward this agenda.
There also needs to be a flow of information and collaborations to bridge the global digital divide. Over 60% of the world's R&D takes place in high-income countries, according to the GSDR report.
Very often when you have scientific discoveries or new innovations, there's a tendency for those who are already ahead to get further ahead and leave others behind, and therefore you have a stretching of inequality, and that's the problem. How do we make sure that whatever is produced is fairly distributed and that we can also minimize the negative consequences for the environment?
For the world to advance together using science and technology, experts say new ways of forming partnerships and financial cooperation are needed for effective transformative changes. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News in Chun.
It looks like Justin Trudeau will enter his second term as Canadian Prime Minister with a minority government. U.S. President Donald Trump gave congratulatory remarks while other parties showed signs of disappointment. Our Kim Jae-hee has the latest.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party has claimed victory at Canada's 43rd general election. The Liberals are projected to have claimed nearly 160 seats, defeating the main opposition Conservatives led by Andrew Scheer. But unlike 4 years ago, Trudeau will be the Prime Minister of a minority government. He will now have to cooperate with other parties when passing legislation. Trudeau thanked supporters across the country and pledged his party will govern for everyone. U.S. President Donald Trump quickly responded to the news of Trudeau's victory and congratulated him for his wonderful and hard-fought win. Trump also added that Canada is well served and said he looks forward to working with Trudeau. Trudeau's campaign was mired in controversy. Despite being endorsed by former U.S. President Barack Obama, the Canadian Prime Minister faced widespread criticism after photos showing him wearing blackface surfaced, and the integrity of his party was questioned in the wake of a corruption case involving a major Canadian construction company. The leader of Canada's Conservative, Andrew Scheer, showed disappointment over coming close but falling short, and the leader of the New Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh, also expressed disappointment but showed willingness to focus on the future. Green Party leader Elizabeth May said the election was a success. Polls opened on Monday in Newfoundland and closed in British Columbia at 7 p.m. on Tuesday local time. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
South Korean striker Son Heung-min, who helped his club team reach the UEFA Champions League final last season, has been nominated for the World's Top Player Award for 2019. The 27-year-old made the list of 30 nominees for the renowned Ballon d'Or award that recognizes the top footballer each year based on voting by journalists, coaches, and the captains of national teams. Son will be up against star players including Lionel Messi of FC Barcelona and Cristiano Ronaldo of Juventus. He's the third South Korean to be nominated for the prestigious award after Seol Gi-hyun in 2002 and Park Ji-sung in 2005. Meanwhile, Lee Kang-in, who won the Golden Ball as the best player at this year's FIFA Under-20 World Cup, was among the 10 nominees for the top award for under-21-year-old players in 2019. The winners of the awards will be revealed on December 2nd in Paris. This weekend, there'll be a chance to experience what Korea was like in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This Friday and Saturday at the Stonewall Path outside Deoksugung Palace in Seoul, it's Cheongdong Culture Night. For visitors, the city has prepared exhibitions, performances, and hands-on activities. Also, 26 nearby culture and history attractions will be open at night, including Deoksugung Palace and the Cheongdong Theater. It's now time to take a look at some of Arirang's digital media content. And Unni News is back, taking a look at the top trending stories.
Hey everyone, I'm Yoon Jung-min, a news reporter at Arirang TV, and welcome to Unni News. Can never forget such horrific things. That was comment in a short video by Yang Gov't, 90-year-old victim of the forced labor during Japanese ruling.
얼마나 힘드셨어요?
그 끔찍한 고통은 영원히 잊을 수 없어.
But you might wonder why this video is going viral in South Korea. It's actually a parody of a recent controversial advertisement of Japanese brand Uniqlo. In his latest ad, an old lady says,
"I can't remember that far back,"
when asked how she used to dress when she was a teen. But when this ad was translated into Korean, it showed up like this. Oh God, do I remember something that happened more than 80 years ago? Many Koreans argued that reminds them of the victims of Japan's wartime atrocities, including comfort women and forced labor, which happened exactly more than 80 years ago. Uniqlo, however, says the Korean version advertisement was never to disparage those victims. It has also decided to stop the advertisement being aired. Hope for no more controversy. Samsung Electronics says it will launch a software update for Galaxy S10. Until then, they're asking its users to use locking system other than fingerprint scanner. Recently, there have been problems on fingerprint recognition system on Galaxy S10. Users say you can unlock your phone not just with your fingerprints, but with a silicone screen protector, your toe, or even a small toy. The users are much concerned because their private information or phone banking system can be stolen. Samsung says they have found out why the sensors have been malfunctioning, and there will be a new software patch to prevent it from happening. However, some users say they still can't trust the unlockers because there might be other stuff that can still unlock their phones. Can never be too careful, right? Korean triangle-shaped kimbap or 삼각김밥 as a favorite for Canadian vegans. Canada, in fact, is one of the largest vegan food-consuming countries in the world. They say U.S. vegan foods are popular from vegan meat to vegan cheese. Among them, you can also find Korean triangle kimbap. It's mainly made with liver, kimchi, and rice. In fact, I was a bit surprised to hear this because here in Korea, these triangle kimbaps often contain meat along with liver, kimchi, rice, and other veggies. But without meat, they can be a good food for vegetarians. They're really good, I can tell you. Many of you will like them. That's all we have for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Bye!
The air quality was better than we expected under the usual mild weather. For more, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle, good evening.
Good evening. Now, thankfully, the air quality, which had been expected to go bad, has remained around those standard levels all day under somewhat cloudy skies. However, some areas can look forward to some rain tonight, starting from Jeju and the East Coast before spreading towards some of the southern provinces. Now, until Thursday, the rain will be on and off in these regions, which are forecast to see from 5 to 30 millimeters of rain. And tomorrow, the air is expected to stay breathable and the weather continues to be warm during the day with highs 1 to 4 degrees above the seasonal average. Now, Seoul will be as cloudy as today, while an umbrella is needed for some of the regions. And the temperature in the morning will stay chilly. Seoul and Daejeon wakes up to 13 degrees Celsius, while it's slightly warmer in the southern regions. And in the daytime, Seoul and Jeju will top out to 22 degrees, and similar readings will apply for the rest of the country. And by the weekend, the temperature will fall back to the seasonal norms, and from Sunday, the morning lows will be down to the single-digit readings. Now I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
And that wraps up this edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for news in depth coming up next.